Welcome to Tyler's Tips. Today we're going to be talking about shadows. Why do shadows matter? In my opinion, shadows are an excellent tool that we can use to engage our viewers a little bit more deeply, kind of turn up the volume on their engagement. And the reason why is that the human brain loves to look at photos that have unanswered questions or little blanks that need to be filled in, and our brains love to answer those little questions and fill in those blanks. And shadows are a great place where we can intentionally leave information out so that our viewers' sort of subconscious brains can have that little element to chew on when they're looking at one of our photos. So some examples. Here's a product photo that I did that we were able to shadow up a lot. Most of the time with product photos, we don't put a lot of shadows in the photo because they're designed really to be, it's designed to sell a product. So it shows people what it is, but it doesn't necessarily, you want to show all the details. And in this case, we used shadows, which I think creates a more compelling image for sure, but also tells a little bit more of a story in a way, and a little bit of an emotional side to what this piece of art feels like. So this is a standing jewelry cabinet. So it's about 5 feet tall. And I think those highlights at the top combined with the shadows at the bottom, it sort of exaggerates that beautiful shape. And it also gives our brains a little something to chew on we know by looking at it that it's all the same wood, but down at the bottom we've got to sort of fill in more details. So it's a more engaging image, ultimately helps hopefully sell that product a little bit more effectively than a standard image. So another example is this photograph, which is a portrait of a portrait painter and his portrait, which is kind of fun. What I chose to do here was I put his face in shadow. It's an atypical choice for a portrait to put your subject in shadow like that. But in this case, I think it works for two reasons. One, I think it creates a little bit of mystery in that you have to look and really look at his face, and you can tell what he's all about, in this photo because there's so much contextual information. He's holding a paintbrush, he's wearing a smock. The other thing that I think it really does is the fact that he's in shadow and the subject of his portrait is brightly lit. That contrast sets up a nice dynamic energy in the photo, that difference between the two people. If he were lit brightly and sort of the same as she's lit, then I think this photo would be less compelling rather. It would be more difficult to distinguish, immediately sort of what's going on. And in this case, because there's a big difference between the look of the two human forms in this image, it creates sort of an interesting dynamic energy there between his subject and the painter. So there you are, a little bit of an atypical use of shadow in a portrait, but I think kind of an interesting example. So the last example I'll use is more typical. This is where I just wanted really dark shadows to simplify this image. So I wanted to really highlight just the single line of her form, like her legs. I wanted to just show that line, and I wanted to try to completely make the other half of her leg disappear. So super dark shadows. And the way that I created those is using a technique called negative fill. So you guys have all heard of fill light, I'm sure, or fill flash. And that's where you're using a light source or reflecting light to fill in the shadows, to add more light there. The opposite is called negative fill. So what we do in that case is we put material that's black or dark just outside the frame on the side of the image where you want to darken up the shadows. And that way light bouncing around hits that dark material and doesn't bounce back into the frame. So you get darker shadows. And here's a behind the scenes photo showing how that works. And you can see it's really simple. In this case, we just used black pieces of foam core along the wall, and it was really effective. It made those shadows a lot darker. I did, coming back to the original image, I did darken this up a bit in post. So, I made those shadows even darker to make it more contrasty. So there you are. Shadows as a tool to create a little bit of a little unanswered question, some blanks for the human mind to fill in when your viewer is looking at your photo, can really amp up your story and make ultimately a more engaging image. So next time you're out there shooting, think about how you can incorporate shadows into your photo in such a way that it really helps your story. And if you are using shadows, don't be afraid to make them pretty dark and leave that question unanswered. Might make for a more compelling image. So I hope this was a useful tip. As always, thank you for your time. And if you have any ideas or questions you'd like me to discuss, send me an email or put a comment in the field below, and I'll work it into a future episode. Until next time.